The morning sun spilled through the curtains, touching the edges of the quiet house where Mary had lived for more than 30 years. Once this house had been alive with laughter, the sound of footsteps, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee. Now, only the low hum of the oxygen machine broke the silence. Her husband, Richard, lay in the living room near the window, his body weak from the stroke that had changed everything. Mary stood beside him, spooning soft oatmeal into a bowl. "Good morning, sweetheart," she whispered, though he couldn't answer clearly. His eyes followed her slowly, and he tried to smile, but his mouth barely moved. The man who once carried her in his arms, who fixed everything around the house, who teased her about her singing voice, now struggled to lift a finger. It broke her heart every day. She fed him carefully, wiping his chin with a towel, pretending not to notice the pain in his eyes. She didn't want him to see her sadness. After breakfast, she adjusted his blanket, opened the window a little, and looked out at the street. The world outside kept moving, neighbors going to work, children laughing, cars passing by, but her life felt paused, as if time had stopped inside their walls. Every corner of the house reminded her of who they used to be. The family photos, the couch they'd picked together, the old record player he loved. Even the little cracks on the kitchen tiles told their story. But now all of it felt heavy, like memories that refused to fade. Her days were quiet but full of small duties: medicine, meals, laundry, and constant watching. Nights were the hardest. She'd sit in the rocking chair beside his bed, listening to his breathing, afraid it might stop. Sometimes she cried softly, careful not to wake him. She missed talking to him, missed hearing his voice calling her name, missed feeling like a wife instead of a nurse. One afternoon, her son Daniel called. He was living in Seattle, working long hours, but he never missed a day without checking on her. "Hey, Mom," he said warmly. "How are you holding up?" Mary forced a small laugh. "I'm fine, honey. We're managing." But her voice trembled slightly. Daniel caught it right away. "Mom," he said gently, "you don't have to pretend with me." She sat down at the kitchen table, tired and quiet. "It's just different, that's all. I miss the way things were." There was silence for a moment, then Daniel spoke again. "You've been doing everything for Dad for months. You need a break, Mom. Just a few days. Let me help you." Mary shook her head, though he couldn't see her. "Your father needs me. I can't just leave." "Mom," he said firmly, but with kindness, "you're burning out. Dad would want you to rest too." The call ended with her promising to think about it, but she knew she wouldn't. She couldn't imagine leaving Richard's side, even for a night. Yet, deep down, she felt exhaustion creeping into her bones. She hadn't laughed in months. She hadn't gone outside except for groceries or hospital visits. Her reflection in the mirror didn't even look like her anymore. That evening, while she was folding laundry, she heard a knock at the door. When she opened it, there stood Daniel with a bright smile, his jacket slightly wet from the rain. "Daniel?" She gasped. "What are you doing here?" "I took some days off," he said, stepping inside and hugging her tightly. "I needed to see you." She felt tears in her eyes as she held on to him. "Oh, you shouldn't have. You have work." He smiled. "You're more important than work, Mom." Later, as he sat beside his father, holding his hand, Mary stood quietly in the doorway, watching them. Richard's lips curved into a faint smile when he saw their son. That small expression, the first real one in weeks, made Mary's chest ache with both happiness and sadness. After dinner, Daniel turned to her with a serious look. "Mum, I want to take you somewhere," he said. "Somewhere?" She repeated. "Yes, just for a few days. You need to breathe again." "I can't, Daniel," she said quickly. "Your father, I'll take care of everything." "I've already arranged for a nurse to come while we're gone," he interrupted gently. "You've done enough. Now it's my turn to take care of you." Mary's heart trembled. The thought of leaving the house scared her. What if something happened while she was away? What if Richard needed her? But when she looked at Daniel so calm, so confident, she saw her husband's strength in him. "Mum," Daniel said softly, taking her hands in his. "You've forgotten how to live. Let me remind you." For a moment the only sound was the rain tapping against the window. Mary looked at her son, at the kindness in his eyes, and felt a tiny spark of hope inside her chest, something she hadn't felt in months. "All right," she whispered finally. "Just a few days." Daniel smiled and pulled her into a hug. "That's all I need." That night, after he went to bed, Mary stood by the window, watching the streetlights glow through the rain. The sound of Richard's breathing was steady behind her. She turned back, brushed a hand through his hair, and whispered, "I'll be back soon, love. I promise." As she lay down that night, for the first time in a long while, she didn't cry herself to sleep. There was still pain, still fear, but under it all, there was a quiet sense of something new waiting just ahead. Something she couldn't name yet. And though she didn't know it, that decision to let go just a little was the first step toward healing. The morning they left, the sky was painted with soft grey clouds and the air smelled like fresh rain. Mary sat quietly in the car beside Daniel, her hands folded in her lap, unsure whether to feel nervous or excited. It had been months since she'd gone anywhere beyond the grocery store or the hospital. As Daniel drove, she watched the road twist through green forests and open fields, the world outside looking alive again after so long. "Where are we going?" she asked finally, glancing at her son. Daniel smiled but kept his eyes on the road. "It's a surprise, Mom. You'll see soon." She sighed softly but didn't press him. Part of her still felt guilty for leaving Richard at home, even though she knew he was safe with the nurse Daniel had arranged. But another part of her, quiet and hidden, was thankful for this small escape. For once, she didn't have to think about medicine schedules or doctor calls. She could just breathe. After hours of driving, the car began to smell faintly of salt. When the trees opened up, Mary gasped. In front of them stretched the wide Oregon coastline, waves crashing against rocks, seagulls flying above the mist, and the soft sound of the ocean meeting the wind. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice full of wonder. "It's beautiful." He smiled proudly. "You always said you loved the sea. I thought you'd like it here." They arrived at a small wooden cabin that stood on a hill overlooking the beach. It wasn't fancy, but it had charm-white curtains, a porch swing, and flower pots by the steps. Inside, everything smelled of pine and sea breeze. Daniel placed her suitcase by the door. "This will be home for a few days," he said. "No alarms, no responsibilities. Just peace." Mary walked to the porch, where she could see the waves stretching endlessly. She closed her eyes, letting the wind touch her face. For the first time in months, her chest didn't feel heavy. That evening, they sat by the fireplace. Daniel cooked a simple dinner, grilled fish and vegetables, and made her tea the way she liked it. They talked for hours, not about hospitals or worries, but about memories. "Do you remember when Dad taught me how to swim?" Daniel asked, grinning. Mary laughed quietly. "You nearly drowned because you wouldn't stop showing off." He chuckled. "He pulled me out and still said, 'That's my boy.'" Mary smiled, then her face softened. "Your father loved moments like that." "He still does," Daniel said gently. "Even if he can't say it, I know he's proud of you for how strong you've been." Her eyes filled with tears. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words. For so long, she had felt like she was just surviving, not living. Later, after Daniel went to bed, Mary sat alone on the porch, wrapped in a blanket. The moonlight shimmered on the waves, and the steady sound of the ocean felt like a heartbeat. She thought of Richard, of their first trip together, of their laughter, of his warm hands holding hers. A deep ache filled her chest, but it was softer now. Less sharp dot when morning came. Daniel was already outside, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Sleep well?" he asked. "Better than I have in months," she said with a small smile. "Good," he replied. "Because I have plans." He led her down to the beach, where he handed her a small bag of seashells. "We're collecting colors," he explained. "You used to love finding pretty shells when I was little." She laughed. "You remember that?" "Every single summer," he said, smiling. They spent the morning walking along the shore, the cold water brushing their feet. The breeze carried the smell of salt and pine, and Mary felt lighter than she had in a long time. Daniel told her stories from work, about his friends, his small apartment in Seattle. It felt like the kind of talk they used to have when he was a teenager, comfortable, easy, full of warmth. At lunch, they found a small seaside cafe with wooden tables and friendly locals. Mary noticed how Daniel kept looking at her, as if making sure she was really smiling, not pretending. "This place is healing you," he said quietly. She nodded. "It's healing something I didn't know was broken." That afternoon, while Daniel went into town to pick up groceries, Mary stayed behind. She walked near the cabin, admiring the wildflowers growing by the fence. A man waved from a nearby cottage, tall, gray-haired, wearing a fisherman's hat. "Afternoon," he greeted with a kind smile. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "It really is," she replied politely. "I'm Robert," he said, leaning on the fence. "My wife used to love these sunsets. I still sit here every evening out of habit." There was a quiet sadness in his tone, one Mary understood too well. "I'm Mary," she said softly. "My husband's unwell. My son brought me here for a few days." Robert nodded gently. "Then he's a good son. Sometimes a little sea air can do wonders." Their conversation was short, but his kindness stayed with her. It wasn't romantic or forward, just one person recognizing another's pain. Still, it made her feel seen, like she wasn't invisible anymore. When Daniel returned, he found her standing by the porch, watching the sun dip into the sea. "You look peaceful, Mom," he said, handing her a cup of tea. "I feel peaceful," she admitted. "I'd forgotten what that was like." He smiled. "That's why I brought you here." The morning sunlight poured through the window, painting the small cabin in gold. Mary woke up feeling lighter than she had in months. The sound of the ocean outside was soothing, like a heartbeat reminding her she was still alive. When she stepped out onto the porch, she found Daniel sitting at the picnic table with something behind his back and a mischievous smile on his face. "What are you hiding?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Daniel grinned and revealed a set of paintbrushes, a small canvas, and a box of paints. "Remember when you used to paint by the lake when I was little? You always said colors helped you feel free." Mary blinked, surprised. "That was a long time ago." "Too long," he replied. "So today we're painting." She tried to protest, saying she didn't remember how anymore, but Daniel simply placed a brush in her hand and said, "Just try." They set up their easels on the porch, facing the ocean. Daniel began with wide, messy strokes, laughing as he accidentally splattered blue paint on his arm. Mary couldn't help but laugh too. Slowly, her own hand began to move, the brush gliding across the canvas. She painted the sky first, soft blues fading into pale yellow, then the waves, rolling gently under the sun. It wasn't perfect, but it felt right. By noon, both of their paintings looked more like abstract art than landscapes. But the laughter they shared made it beautiful. Mary hadn't laughed like that in so long she had forgotten what it felt like. For a few hours, the world outside her grief disappeared. After lunch, Daniel went into town to buy groceries, leaving her alone at the cabin. Mary cleaned up their mess, humming quietly. When she stepped outside to hang her brush towels, she noticed the man from the next cabin, Robert, walking his dog along the shore. He waved when he saw her. "Afternoon, Mary," he said warmly. "Hello, Robert," she replied, smiling. "Your dog's beautiful." "This is Daisy," he said proudly. "She keeps me company out here." Mary knelt to pat the dog's head. "She seems gentle." "She is. Lost her energy for chasing things, just like me," he said with a soft chuckle. "How's your husband doing?" Her smile faltered for a moment. "He's stable. It's been hard, but my son's been helping me." Robert nodded, his eyes kind. "You're lucky to have him. I lost my wife 5 years ago. Spent a long time thinking I'd never feel joy again." Mary looked at him with quiet understanding. "Sometimes it feels that way," she admitted. He gestured toward the ocean. "But then you come here and it reminds you life keeps going, even if it doesn't look the same." His words lingered with her as they said goodbye. It wasn't flirtation. It was simple connection between two people who understood pain. She walked back to the porch, sat down with a cup of tea, and watched the horizon. For the first time, she didn't feel guilty for enjoying the calm. When Daniel returned, he found her painting again. "Mom," he said with a grin, "you didn't wait for me." She laughed softly. "I got inspired." He sat beside her, looking at the canvas. "It's beautiful. You've still got it." "Maybe I never really lost it," she said thoughtfully. "Maybe I just forgot how to see beauty for a while." That evening, they walked along the beach, the cool sand under their feet. The sunset was deep orange, spreading across the sky like a painting come to life. Daniel skipped stones across the water like he used to as a kid. Mary watched him and felt something she hadn't in months, peace mixed with gratitude. "You know," Daniel said suddenly, "Dad would love this place. He always talked about retiring near the ocean." Mary nodded, her voice quiet. "He used to say the sea made him feel small in a good way." Daniel looked at her. "I think he'd want you to find that feeling again, to live, not just exist." His words touched her deeply. She had spent so long focused on what she had lost that she had forgotten there was still life left to live. That night, while Daniel packed away their art supplies, Mary walked to the water's edge alone. The tide rolled in and out, the waves whispering softly against her feet. She thought of Richard, their first dance, the road trips, the laughter. The man he used to be was still alive somewhere in her heart. She realized that love didn't vanish with time or sickness. It simply changed shape. The next morning, she woke early and found Robert sitting on the rocks, sketching the sunrise. He looked up when she approached. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. She smiled. "Just didn't want to miss this view." He handed her a small shell. "Found this earlier. Thought it looked like a heart." Mary accepted it, smiling softly. "Thank you. Keep it," he said. A reminder that even broken things can still be beautiful. When she returned to the cabin, Daniel was making breakfast. "You're up early," he said. She placed the shell on the windowsill. "I didn't want to waste a single minute of this morning." Daniel noticed the gentle glow on her face. "You look different, Mom." "Happier." "Maybe I am," she said. "I think I'm remembering who I used to be." They ate together, laughing easily. Every sound, every color, every breath felt like a gift. As the sun rose higher, Mary looked out at the sea once more and realized something had shifted inside her. The sadness was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She was learning that even after life changes everything, joy can still return in small steps, in kind words, in quiet mornings by the ocean. And deep down, She knew Richard would want her to feel exactly this way, alive, hopeful, and strong enough to keep going. The last morning at the cabin arrived with a soft mist hanging over the ocean. Mary awoke before Daniel, stepping onto the porch to breathe in the crisp sea air. It was peaceful, the waves rolling gently, and for the first time in months, she felt a calmness that didn't carry guilt or sorrow. The trip had been a brief escape, but it had opened a door inside her, a reminder that life could still hold quiet joys. Daniel joined her with 2 cups of coffee. "Morning, Mum," he said softly, passing her one. "Sleep well." "Better than I have in a long time," she replied, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. They watched the tide together, talking about simple things, the clouds, the movement of the water, the patterns of birds flying above. Daniel didn't push conversation. He simply shared the moment with her, and Mary realized how much she had missed having someone beside her who simply cared without judgment. After breakfast, Daniel suggested a walk along the cliffs nearby. "There's a trail I think you'll like," he said. "Just easy, nothing strenuous." Mary agreed. She hadn't exercised or explored in months, yet her steps felt lighter than they had in years. The trail wound through wildflowers and soft grasses, overlooking the rolling waves. As they walked, Mary noticed a sense of gratitude filling her chest. She had carried so much worry and sorrow for Richard, for the house, for life, that she had forgotten how small, simple pleasures could revive her spirit. Halfway along the trail, they met Robert again. He was picking up driftwood along the path, his hands rough from work but careful as he held the pieces. He looked up, smiling warmly. "Good morning, Mary. Out for a walk?" "Yes," she said, smiling back. "It's beautiful today." He nodded. "It always is here. Sometimes I think we forget to notice." Mary realized he was right. The world hadn't stopped being beautiful while she had been consumed with worry. She had just stopped seeing it. Robert didn't linger long, but the brief exchange lifted her spirits further, a gentle reminder that kindness and connection could be found in unexpected places. Back at the cabin, Mary and Daniel decided to paint once more. This time, she was more confident, brushing vibrant yellows and deep blues onto the canvas. Daniel watched her, silently impressed by the way her creativity flowed again. "You're glowing, Mom," he said quietly, his eyes reflecting genuine pride. Mary paused, smiling faintly. "I think I'm remembering how to live, even a little." They spent the afternoon packing and tidying the cabin, sharing small jokes and teasing each other about their artistic skills. Mary realized that laughter had become natural again, no longer forced. The trip, brief as it had been, had reminded her that even in the midst of hardship, joy could sneak in quietly, almost unnoticed, until it became part of daily life again. Before leaving, Mary took a moment alone on the porch. She looked out at the ocean, the wind brushing her hair, and felt a mix of emotions: love, longing, hope. Her thoughts drifted to Richard, lying at home, unable to as the day faded into night. The ocean's rhythm lulled her into a rare calm. She knew her heart still carried sorrow, but it also carried love, the kind that changes shape but never disappears. That night, before falling asleep, Mary whispered a quiet thank you to her son, to the sea, and maybe even to life for reminding her that even after pain, beauty can return in small, gentle ways. Before leaving, Mary took a moment alone on the porch. She looked out at the ocean, the wind brushing her hair, and felt a mix of emotions: love, longing, hope. Her thoughts drifted to Richard, lying at home, unable to speak clearly, but still very much the man she loved. She worried, as always, about leaving him, but she also understood that caring for oneself didn't mean abandoning him. It meant being strong enough to return, renewed, ready to give love without exhaustion. Daniel returned and found her standing there. "Mum?" he asked gently. "I'm ready," she said, turning to him with a smile. "I feel lighter. Thank you." The drive home was quiet in a comfortable way. Mary stared out the window, watching the landscape change, thinking of the moments that had reminded her what life could be beyond sorrow. Daniel reached over and held her hand briefly, a simple gesture that made her heart swell with warmth. When they arrived home, Richard was in his chair by the window. The nurse greeted them and gave a quick update, and then Daniel helped Mary inside. Richard looked up, his eyes lighting when he saw her. Though he could barely speak, his smile was enough to fill the room. Mary walked to his side, taking his hand gently. "I missed you, love," she whispered. A single tear ran down his cheek, and in that moment, Mary realized that leaving for a few days had not weakened her connection with him. It had strengthened it. She could be fully present for Richard without losing herself. Over the next few days, Mary found that the calm she had discovered at the cabin stayed with her. She found small moments to enjoy, watching birds at the feeder, sitting in the sun with a cup of tea, even painting quietly in her living room. She noticed that she could laugh without guilt, smile without reservation, and feel love for Richard without feeling trapped. Daniel watched quietly, smiling to himself. He had hoped to remind his mother of life's beauty, and he could see it returning in small, steady steps. Mary's shoulders no longer carried the weight of endless worry. She was still careful, still attentive to Richard, but she had remembered that life, her own life, was worth living too. One evening, she stood by Richard's side, looking out the window at the sunset. Daniel came in quietly and leaned against the doorframe. "He's lucky to have you, Mom," he said softly. Mary squeezed Richard's hand, feeling both love and gratitude. "I'm lucky too," she replied. That night, as she sat in her chair after tucking Richard in, she held the shell Robert had given her at the cabin.